What's going on? What's going on? We are back in the studios of Detroit is Different. And actually, today, it kind of started beforehand, a very fruitful, colorful discussion. But we love that culture here at Detroit is Different. It's about the creativity that leads to the culture, that leads to the community that we love. And somebody here that we have as a guest is academia. Definitely culture. And recently he was connecting a lot of hip hop artists. So anytime you bring together hip hop artists, that means that you love hip hop. And anytime you love hip hop, that means you definitely are a fan of layers of culture that always touches our heart, but also open to a little bit of unexpected chaos that can happen because it wouldn't be hip hop without it. But also a hell of a love for what can be done in the city of Detroit, bringing it to life. Mr. Feodies Shipp, how are you, my brother?
I'm doing great, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Oh man, everything's cool. And you actually get behind the mic and you were like thinking that, okay, I thought we were just going to talk. I'm like, nah, I'm bringing you to the studio. We going to actually pod, my brother.
Yes, sir.
We are podding. So in that same world of podding, I usually start these Detroit is Difference with your origin, more so to the city of Detroit, you and your peoples. So with that being said, man, what led you and your people to the city of Detroit? I know you got roots here, but how far back
Oh wow. What led
does the
my
Shipp
people to
family
Detroit?
sit in the reside of the 482 zip?
I'm born and raised in Detroit, West Side, Bagley Elementary, Hampton Middle School, Cass
Okay.
Technical High School.
Okay.
I tell people my goal in life was to get out of my mother's house, so I ran away a whole 30 miles to Ann Arbor to attend the University of Michigan after high school.
All right. You giving me too much of you. What led your
But my
people
family-
here? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
my family, oddly enough, what led my family, my father's side was from a small town in West Mississippi, or small town called West Mississippi.
Okay,
Their homes-
the actual town is called West Mississippi.
Yep.
Interesting. Is it actually on the western side of Mississippi?
It is.
Okay, okay,
No, it's actually on the eastern side of Mississippi.
Yeah,
And it's
I
in
got you.
Holmes County.
okay.
And what led my family up here was racism.
Okay.
Good old fashioned Southern racism. And my great grandfather left Mississippi to avoid being lynched.
Okay, so your great grandfather came by way of avoiding lynching, which is commonplace for a lot of folks. We even go to Coleman Young's Hardball and
Yeah.
so many other stories. We can look at Jimmy Boggs. We can look at so many stories of people escaping the atrocities of the South and transition them to a different brand of racism as they made it up north, as they say.
Yeah.
And Mississippi, though, that's unique because so many of those lines of migration patterns, like when we think of Detroiters, Alabama and Georgia come in like they
Yeah.
blazing.
Yeah.
And Mississippi is usually one of those tracks that lead over to Chicago, but I could see maybe on the eastern side. So
Yeah.
you may have family in Chicago.
I got a lot of family in Springfield, Illinois.
Okay.
And they moved up north. They were in Indiana, Illinois, and then some of them ended up in Detroit. So I don't think anyone's in Indiana anymore.
Okay.
They were in Gary, Indiana for a while.
Oh man, you
and-
may have known some family that was running with the Jackson 5 then, my brother.
That would have been nice.
2800, what's that? 2800 Jackson Street?
I think so.
Think
But
that's
but what's wild is that's my paternal grandfather, my paternal side, my father's side. My mother's side is different. My mother's side, her father's family were they tell the story. Yeah, a lot of this stuff's family lore.
Yeah.
Some stuff, but they say like some of the were brought over as slaves, were bought by Quakers
Mm,
and moved to Iowa and set free,
interesting.
and ended up living in Iowa and amongst the people in Iowa and setting up roots and marrying white people and
Well,
things
let
of that
me
nature.
say this,
Yeah.
my brother. Hey, here at Detroit is Different, the brand of Carrie Frazier, I believe the oral tradition a whole lot more sometimes than the
The written.
.com traditions that exist sometimes. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I take that. So that's interesting. You say Iowa. And also, like, when I think of Iowa, I know it's some folks out in Waterloo and everything, but it ain't a lot of us
No, Ames,
hunting
Iowa.
around.
Ames.
Ames, Iowa.
Ames,
Where about is that?
like the middle of the state.
Okay.
Like, in my opinion, the definition of the middle of nowhere.
Okay, we're gonna find out you related to Caitlin Clark. It's like, okay.
She need a manager. I'll help her out.
Drop them buckets. Okay. So so do you still have family out that way? Or
Yes, I have an aunt that lives there in Iowa in Ames. Most of her siblings and stuff have moved to other parts of the country, California, Phoenix, Washington State. My grandfather grew up part-time in Iowa and then ended up in Detroit. He grew up during the Depression. Actually, his parents put him and his siblings up for adoption because they couldn't take care of him anymore. He ended up joining the military.
what branch?
Army. He served the Army, made it all the way to Colonel in the United States Army. Served during World War II, but didn't get to fight because he was black. So he was what they call the triple nickels, black parachute, one of the first black paratroopers in the history of the U.S. military. And he ended up fighting forest fires in California during World War II, but he did serve during Korea. And he got out just before Vietnam, and he worked for the city of Detroit in the housing division for a long time before he retired.
All right. So first off, your grandfather's story already, the way you just presented it, so many more questions, but I'm gonna just go with a couple. So you said that he was one of those people, just so that people kind of get an understanding of this, because my grandfather in the home we live, he was one of the few that did in crossfires end up in some action of World War II.
Okay.
And this home was purchased with one of the few soldiers that got a GI Bill. So, with that, or black soldiers, there's a lot of white soldiers that got it.
Most
be plain.
Most of the white soldiers got it.
So, so with this being said, he was looking for battle. So I want to frame this the right way, just so people looking know that there was an arc and thought process that through service could be gateways towards equality, towards freedom, towards justice, especially in World War II. This was a pervasive thought. And a lot of brothers like my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, and your maternal grandfather, I assume. And being that you speak this way, did he speak about saying like, look, I really wanted to serve and I wanted to support this because he thought that that would be a gateway for...
I can't say he wanted to serve. Again, my grandfather grew up during the Depression. He wanted to eat.
Okay.
And the government, the United States Army was offering an opportunity for him to eat and to work. And he had patriotism and a lot, the Pearl Harbor, affected a lot of people, but he wasn't running up just for America. He wanted, stable work. He cared about his country, but he wanted to eat and have a job and give back. And once he got in, he took to it like a fish to water. He was a military man, get his things together, and he liked the structure. He liked the work. He was insulted that he wasn't allowed to fight. He wanted to go fight once he was in, but he did, he's proud of his service record and what he did in America, and he got to help stateside. And, but no one wants to say, I fought I fought forest fires during World War II, when other people talking about storming Normandy and going through France with Patton,
So, I mean, it's unique, just to frame in the balance of it, where we think of that arc. And that's where, like, I just like to give perspective of the story, because right now, just when we look at what's happening with service and who's present in mine in service, and even when you talk about California, and it's like, we've never seen fires like this before. And it's like, some things kind of remain the same.
Yes.
The tragedy now is that it's a lot of brothers that are incarcerated and fighting some of those fires. You know what I'm saying? Which is a whole nother arc of this. So you talk about this journey and then to the city of Detroit. Do you know what led him to Detroit as opposed to anywhere at that point in time? He would have had a run of definitely going back to Iowa. He was in California for a little bit. What led him to Detroit?
His wife. Again, he had family in Iowa, some family in Detroit. He came to Detroit. He met my grandmother. My grandmother was from at the time, a prominent family. She was a Hill. My grandmother's name was Georgia Hill. Her father was Charles Hill. He was the second pastor of Hartford Memorial Baptist Church.
Wow.
It's still a big church today.
You got that right.
but back then he was the pastor before Charles Adams.
Mm.
He was Charles Adams' mentor. He was
Mm.
Mayor Young's mentor. He's the first black man in the city of Detroit to run for city council. He got brought before the commission on that commission on the socialists, where they were bringing everybody in and badgering them about being socialists and things of that nature. But he had 8 kids. My grandmother was his second child, and her and my grandfather met and fell in love, and they were 2 beautiful people who looked like movie stars when they was together, and they went on to have 4 kids and traveled all over the world while he was in the military.
Okay, now we gotta kind of stop here a little bit, because now your great grandfather's story seems very interesting as well, of your grandmother's father. And then just when we think about that banner of Hartford Memorial, so people can get a context, like Hartford for Detroit would be, if anybody's familiar with like Harlem, would be like Abyssinia. It is the premier or one of the premier churches, places of faith for black people to worship, and has been that for generations when we think of what it represents, who's come there. Like when we think of the different pastors that would pass through, Hartford was one of those places and homes of saying, basically, if you can connect with the congregation of Hartford throughout the 1900s, and even to this day, it's one of those stumps. Like 2024, I would expect that Pastor Adams will be very active politically, even with what's happening right now in the pulse of things there, but even back then. So when we think of the organizing of labor, when we think of the transition of what that call to action of for welcoming black folks to come to the city of Detroit, Hartford was one of those staples then. And that is lineage that directly connects to you. And now I'm looking at this guy from Iowa stepping in. So did you know any, like, what was the relationship between that, or did you even hear any stories? Because I can only imagine the perspective of like, all right, now who are you and what you doing, brother? I know you a soldier. I done met a lot of soldiers. What's going on, man?
I mean, all of this, the family lore, oral tradition, oral history tells me that my grandfather was very well received by the family. He came very well recommended. They had, family was a little leery of him because he was an orphan.
Yeah, I was gonna say I saw that would play out as you know what I'm saying.
But he his uncle was close friends with my great grandfather.
Okay, so there we go.
They introduced him, and they and the 2 of them hit it off. And he was respectable in his approach. I did it the old timey way, courted her. And
I saw him where you dealing with that pastor's daughter. You better be old timey. You better be. You can't be, what would they say back then? You can't be fresh.
Well, I think the family didn't really like the fact that he kind of took her from the family, because they they got married, and he's military. They all over the world, living in Germany, living in San Francisco, living in North Carolina, different things like that. And so, my mother always said we were the out-of-town cousins. So my great-grandfather, they had 8 kids, and those 8 kids produced 24 kids. And so my mother was like, we come into town, and we had that, we the out-of-town cousins, so we always had fun with our cousins and stuff. And when they got out the military, and finally moved back to Detroit, that's when they learned, being out-of-town cousin is not the same as
being an in-town
cousin.
So now let's, I guess, get into the arc of your peoples. So they're here, like, kind of settling, I guess, as your parents. So your parents settle here. Now, after the whole out-of-town cousin thing and everything, so what was that journey like for your mom, just being, like, settling back in the city? And did she, like, go to high school here? Like, when did they settle back?
Well, my mother went here part of the time. She went to Northwestern for a little while.
Wait, time out. Mighty Coats. Mighty Coats. My bad. I'm a coat. My bad. Keep going.
She went to Northwestern. This was back around the time when they was when they was calling it Malcolm X High School, way back in the
All
day.
right, so let me explain a little bit of that.
Yeah,
Okay, after the rebellion, a lot of students were painting it's known that it's a cannon in front of Northwestern High
yeah,
School, even the old Northwestern, the old NO, as they call it, the big NO. They carried that cannon to the new NO, and it was painted red, black, and green. So things like that took place the same way that Jesus in front of the Sacred Heart Memorial was painted black. So I'm
yeah,
just giving people
yeah.
Detroit history.
Yeah, no, my timing is off. It was before then because she graduated high school in '65. So, but
Oh,
they
okay.
was here. They were here for a couple years, and they ended up going to Yellow Springs, Ohio. So my mother went to Northwestern for 2 years, but then they moved to Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Hmm.
That's where Dave Chappelle is from. But no, I
Hmm.
don't know him. And then she ended up graduating from Yellow Springs, Ohio, Yellow
Okay.
Springs High School, and then she went on to U of M, and she
And
went to U of M,
coming back
Michigan.
over this way.
Yeah, to Ann
Hmm.
Arbor and back in the state and closer to family. She enjoyed her time at Michigan. She pledged AKA. Shout out to Beta Eta chapter.
Hmm.
And my father was different. My father grew up. Again, he was the oldest of six children. His father served in the Navy, in the military, in the
Mm.
Navy, did 4 years, traveled a little bit. My grandmother was a homemaker, and he worked at a plant. I can't remember what plant it was. For some reason, I had it in my head growing up that he was a mailman, but
Hmm.
was disabused of that notion later on in life. But he worked at a plant, and sadly had a problem with alcohol.
Mm.
And like the old school, our grandparents, they didn't get divorces; they just broke up. And
Hmm.
so he, I don't know exactly the whole story or when and where, but I know my father didn't drink, didn't use drugs, didn't do any of that because he didn't want to turn into his father, and was very careful about that. But my father was very aspirational,
Mm.
and he wanted a better life than the life he had coming up.
Well, I do want to frame this.
Yeah.
So similar, like the in kinship, being with a serviceman in the Navy, um, and your mother traveling, they shared that in their childhood, that they traveled kind of like
Well, no, my father was born after my
after he did
grandfather
his
was in the Navy.
service.
Yes.
So, okay, so just the service in line.
Yes.
So, okay. So it was just that connection, just period, and that they met and they connected. So his whole time he was here. What neighborhood here?
He grew up in what I call the Central District, between Davidson and West Grand Boulevard. He went to Central High School. He
Okay.
graduated from Central High School
Ah, the Trailblazers.
in '64.
Mm.
Uh, yeah. And I'm named after him. So anybody,
Mm.
Feodies Shipp III. Yes, that's my father. It's not too many Feodies in the world.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not, and I'll tell you this fact
Yeah.
too, because like right around the corner, that means that he was in school with my auntie. Shout out Joyce, and also the Davis brothers.
Okay.
So Don Davis that founded
Yeah.
so many things, but more so, I think he would be known for United Sound Studios
Okay.
and writing most of those records for the dramatics that we loved.
Yeah.
What you see is what you get, and all of that stuff and production behind that. A lot of like the production wing when we think of Parliament Funkadelic. That was Don Davis and Will
Yeah.
Davis and that family. Those are some Central guys. They made their way here and graduated from Central, like in that 65 class.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
they were, or it may have been 64, but they made their way here from Alabama, but grew up right over there on Grand because we in a Central neighborhood now, though
Yeah.
Northwestern it is. But so this framing, in this neighborhood, and where do you all settle and where do you come up? What neighborhood?
I grew up I grew up in the Bagley district off
Mm.
Nichols in Wyoming over near Mary Grove College between Santa
Okay.
Maria and Santa Clara. Two
Okay.
family flat, 17336 Kentucky Street.
What do you remember? What was that like as a kid growing up?
I mean I love growing up in the neighborhood. I remember having a lot of good times with my friends. I remember the swimmobile. I remember
Mm.
being able to ride our bike all over the city. with no problems. Parents just be like, bye, see you later. And we
Mhm.
out in the streets all day and come home tired. And parents like, why you tired? Like, I done rode my bike downtown and back,
Mhm.
all over the town. I remember random acts of violence, just how
Mhm.
growing up in the 80s and when we hit middle school, like how stuff would just jump off randomly at any moment. Crazy. I remember a lot of good times, friends, love. Also wildness because I grew up in the 80s during the crack era. So, and
Mhm.
during Devil's Night and houses burning down and things of that nature. So, Detroit was different then than it is now.
Mhm.
The challenges were a little, we still living with the legacy of those challenges. But I wouldn't trade Detroit for anything. I love growing up in Detroit. I beat my chest all the time. I'm from Detroit and I'm proud of my city and I'm proud of the fact that we stood up to our issues. Like people be like, I don't understand all of the fires in Detroit. Like, well, you got to understand our neighborhoods. The block clubs would fight against the crack dealers by burning them out and burning the house down. You can't sell crack in the house that's burnt down. It wasn't all just the landlords getting insurance money. It was community people fighting back the only way they could.
Mm.
So, and I like the fact that I'm from a city where people stood up and we don't care about avarice. We don't care about just because you got money because you selling drugs, but you hurting your community and your neighborhood, and we want to push back. And I think Detroit is a city that did that and fought against racism, fought against the deliberate delivery and distribution of drugs and guns in our communities. And I'm proud to be from a community that can stand up to that, and people to this day are still doing good things. I just was with Malik Yakini today over at his food co-op. It's not open yet, but this man's had a 20-year dream to start a food co-op in the city to help the city not be a food desert, as a lot of people call it. So
Mhm.
people like Malik, who stand up in this community, that's something I'm proud of and love.
So, all right, and with that, this is a topic that has come up on the podcast before, and I like to always frame it like, um, so a couple different things because you just laid a lot. So I want to just unpack it a little bit. So the first unpacking is crack cocaine and the impacts that it had because there were I think that I'm born in 82, so seeing things after it definitely is more flourishing and recognizing what happened. It seems as if especially like in Carl Hart's book of where things happen, um it had a different impact, but black communities and drug use have been like hand in hand for a while just due to the opportunities here and the poverty that is pervasive just due to the other social conditions. So if you go like a little further back than the crack era where people say, man, it was crazy. You had a lot of soldiers that struggled with heroin and like the methadone clinics that were very prevalent in many places. So, depending upon who you talk to, if you talk to somebody from New York, they're like, man, the 80s was amazing comparable to what was happening in the 70s and depending upon the communities and where things were happening coming back with so many soldiers with what heroin was, but being a depressant drug, it had different impacts than what cocaine was, as it gets you upper. And with that cocaine, I think I like to frame it like this because oftentimes people be like, man, why would you smoke crack anyway? Why would you smoke crack anyway? And I believe that a lot of young people are experiencing and witnessing this now. So cocaine in the mid 70s was glamorized as a glamour drug, like almost like a champagne, like hey, you
Yeah.
you want to try some champagne? Like we're at a party, Studio 54. This is what all the celebrities do. This is a sign of opulence and excellence. So then you get another form of processing this cocaine in the crack, and I believe the show Snowfall, like in the first two seasons, really documents like the how this became pervasive. So it's almost like, hey, you want the access to the opulence, the lifestyle of the rich and famous, but at a budget? Here you go. And that was crack cocaine. And no one knew the impacts at the time, especially like with the drug sentencing laws and the ways that that would become pervasive soon after like the death of Len Bias and other things, and it was like a lot of things that impact the black community, a social experiment that left horrors
Yeah.
in many communities, but it also shows some of the resilience, as you kind of went into some of those stories of resilience that's rarely even brought up. So I want to explore that a little bit as you talk about some communities took a stance against this. As I remember, sometimes my father taking a stance against what would happen on the block, and it would be layers because like the first time I saw anybody selling crack. So it's like, I mean, definitely statute of limitations is up. Uh, Big James, who his son was like one of my friends, an older friend, so little James, and his father actually was a kid, like a freshman, when my mother was a senior in high school, and he allowed I don't know if like this is like the gang activity. So folks would run he had a 2-family flat on the corner where I have my garden right now. So like this is talking about like revitalizing everything. And so folks would run a smaller crack operation out of the first flat. And with it, it would just bring a different amount of energy, as anybody would imagine. If you're going to have a street level drug operation, it's going to bring a different amount of energy. And we sometimes would get like, hey, you can play from this fire hydrant to that fire hydrant. And at times things would, go awry, as you're dealing with a lot of young men in this gang. I don't know if people know like folks, so like the Gangster Disciples, Vice Lord Nation, and how things would go. That was very prevalent. I'm glad that I was younger as that kind of passed over, but it was very active at one point in time. So my father would sometimes have these exchanges with James, and it would be unique because Lil James was on the West Side Cubs with me. You know what I'm saying? I would watch their family deal with different things, like when the water would go out or when this would happen. Seeing my homeboy's house get raided, you know what I'm saying, and him kind of finding asylum in our house. But my father directly has challenges his father, because your father is bringing something into our community that I don't want to see. It was a very layered community dynamic.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it wasn't like a Tyler Perry movie, like, you the crack dealer and we hate you. It was more like, bro,
Yeah.
we want you to get some other opportunity. But then you turn around, because Big James already served like a lot of time in jail, and it was just tough for him to find
Yep.
other opportunities to where he found choice. This was like this animates a lot of my childhood, and like when I write my raps or when I speak to stuff like this. And that's where, like I say, like, your community took stances against this. What was the approach? What was the relationship? Did you remember?
Again, I think I grew up in a my neighborhood is still one of the stronger neighborhoods in the city. I mean, it was oddly enough, like I talk sh- I talk stuff to my
Oh, you
friends to
can
this day.
profanity is welcome on Detroit Different. So you
I
can.
talk shit to my friends to this day. Like I was the only single parent household in my neighborhood, and I'm the only kid that went to college. All my friends had 2-parent households, and they still didn't go to college. I'm like, y'all talk all that shit. Daddy need to be in the house, and what happened with y'all? We go back and forth on it, but my neighborhood was strong, man. Like, it was village stuff. Like, you couldn't. I remember one time we skipped school. All the kids, we all skipped school. We just didn't want to go that day. We skipped
What
school.
grade? What grade?
This was like 4th, 5th grade. What older kids let us. We all, we was like 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. A whole group of us, a pack of us. We skipped school, and we snuck in my friend's house, and neighbors saw us, called all the parents, because they had everyone's phone number back then, and we all got beat. All got in trouble, spanked. Yelled at by the neighbor who caught us, and then parents came home. That village stuff was real, and I don't know if it's that my generation resented the village so much that we turned our back on it. But that played a real role. And I ain't gonna say no one smoked crack in our neighborhood or did anything, but no crack houses got set up. And I think that's something, when you want to do context and framing, Detroit, I believe, is different in that our city is horizontal. I mean, our city is Yeah, horizontal and not vertical. Where Chicago, DC, New York, they all vertical, so they set on corners selling crack. People selling crack in houses in Detroit, like
Mhm.
you go in somebody's house and lay up. You don't really see the activity on the street like in other cities around the nation. But the activity in the houses, they stop. The houses stop. People stop taking care of the houses. The grass stopped getting cut. Repairs. You start, people getting fights and stuff. Windows broke out. You start seeing stuff like that. And then neighborhoods just, no one would stand up and say, hey, you wouldn't see the block club meeting and they'd be like, oh, we going to burn this house down. But people be at the block club meeting arguing and saying we need to do something. We done called the police ain't coming, they not doing something. And next thing you know, this trouble house in the block neighborhood is burnt on fire, burnt up, and they chasing, but it didn't happen a lot in my neighborhood over on Kentucky or between 6 Mile, Curtis, and Livernois and Wyoming. It wasn't a whole lot over there, but you go in other parts of the city, going further west, and it looked like, after years, it looked like Vietnam. You walking through the neighborhood, one house, 3 houses gone, another house, 4 houses gone, and that legacy is continued. And then, the whole Devil's Night thing where people were burning houses down every every October 30th, for insurance money and just, shits and giggles. It was a wild era, in that regard. But I think that the community did not, people stood up. People had block clubs. People met. People called police. They fought. And if necessary, they'd burn you out. And that's just, how it went down.
All right, so from there, and this is, and I appreciate you just sharing the richness of what that community is, and this is the framework where you go to U of M. Why did you choose U of M? What led you to U of M? And I know that, yes, technician as well, but I want to get to the U of M journey of it too.
Definitely. No, I went to U of M because my mother went to U of M and my grandfather went to U of M. And so just going to U of M was just what I was going to do. And I never really thought much about it. I didn't know much about U of M. I know the difference between U of M and Michigan State. I didn't know. I'd never been to Ann Arbor. My mother took me to Ann Arbor a few times to visit friends, but never took me to the campus or showed me around. But and also at the time, my mother got me the Michigan Education Trust, where they prepaid the tuition and they limit you where you can go. You can only really use that in in-state school. So I really wanted to go to Columbia because I loved New York Undercover and I wanted to go to New York.
Okay.
And I wanted to be in New York City. I love New York in that I love the idea they have apartment buildings. They got a pizza place across the street from your apartment, a bodega on the corner, a dry cleaners. Like that urban mix is different than it is in Detroit. Like Detroit, you got to leave the block to get to something. There in New York, it's like they're on the block. That fascinated me. So I really wanted to go to Columbia, but my mom said, we don't have the money to send you to Columbia, and you can go to Michigan, and it'll be all paid for. So I went to Michigan, and
what was the experience at U of M like for you as a student?
It was awesome. I loved, Michigan would have been great if it wasn't for those damn classes.
Hilarious.
I was not a great student, but I did learn a lot. In terms, I skipped classes a lot. I chased women. I was involved in organizations and activities.
What organization?
I was in part of A-Bing Multicultural Lounge. A-Bing, each of the residence halls on campus had multicultural lounges, or the black lounges as they call them. I lived in East Quad for 3 years on campus.
So let's unpack that a little bit. What was in the cultural lounge? What was happening? What was the feel of it? Like, what would you all do? Like, was it just a music thing? Was it kicking back? What was connected?
A-Bing, like I said, each of them has a different name. A-Bing is a Jamaican term, as I understand, or a Caribbean term of a horn used to call the community together. And so we'd hang out in A-Bing, and at the time, we'd watch Martin, we'd watch Def Comedy Jam, black TV shows. We'd have spades tournaments, bid whist tournaments. We did programming. We did what we called the Multicultural Arts Festival, in which we had like a talent show and arts and culture activities for students. Uh, we tried to create a community of support for students of color with at the campus.
All right. So this is also, as you bring up Martin and Def Comedy Jam, this is running concurrent with the one thing that resonates, I think, with young Black culture, which eventually is mimicked by all young culture. The Fab Five happens to be going to
Yep,
U of M at the time.
it was there.
What was the impact of that culture? Like, did you all feel the feel of like how the world was looking at U of M connecting through Fab Five?
Yes. I mean, at the time when I started at Michigan. I started at Michigan June 30th, 1991. And that year, I mean, freshman year, we went to the Rose Bowl. We went to the NCAA finals for basketball. Sophomore year, we went to the Rose Bowl. We went to the NCAA finals for basketball. I think my junior year, we won a hockey national championship. I think senior year, we won a swimming national championship.
Mhm.
But at the time, I tell people, I think I went to Michigan during the golden age for Black people, because I started again from 1991, and 88 was the third BAM 3 student protests, and they implemented what was called the Michigan Mandate, in which they openly really started recruiting students of color to the campus, and our numbers went up significantly at the time. We still never got to our goals of 12, representing the state of like 12%.
Okay, what's the acronym BAM mean? Please break
Oh,
that down a little
sorry.
bit more and share.
Thank you. Black Action Movement. There are 3 Black Action movements in the history of U of M, in which student organizations, primarily led by Black students, African American students, led protests about conditions and standards on campus, or the treatment of students of color on campus. The one in 88 started because some white students called in to the U of M radio station, and just the host gave him a half hour that he just told racist jokes for a half hour on the radio station, on the public radio station, and students started protesting about that kind of stuff. And at the time, the president decided to create what they call the Michigan Mandate, and started putting more effort into recruiting and admitting more students of color. And the numbers went up. And I went there, it was probably the highest number when I was on campus from 91 to 95, was probably the highest numbers the university ever had as far as Black students.
Do you know the other years of the other two?
The other two,
You said BAM 3.
73, and I want to say 73 and 78.
Okay, so 73, 78. So in 73 and probably 78, that leads to one of the more controversial Black intellectuals of Harold Cruz is on campus at probably 78, I would say. That wrote the Crisis of the Negro Intellectual book. I don't know if you're familiar.
Not familiar with that.
But for people that read the whole concept, and do you know the just cause for back then? Is it the same, basically just cause white people being racist?
Yeah, white people.
Yeah, white people. Yeah, that will be a constant in all institutions of America, but especially academic institutions in America. So you're there and you're feeling some of that energy post that, and it's coming together. And then I speak to the Fab Five more because I do know that the football team exists, and you mentioned hockey and other stuff, but Fab Five like had a pulse of like Black culture, like really specifically hip hop culture, like where people felt like, and I assume just that connection and that feel, you being on campus, witnessing more of that and seeing some of that, probably welcomed a different feel. And this is also the unique dynamic of America too, because I don't know if any economists could do like a direct correlation in theory, but even to this day, I assume the amount of Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, Ray Jackson, Jimmy King, Juwan Howard jerseys, and interest and attention connected to that team heightened the value of the Michigan brand exponentially.
Yes.
Even more so than football, which is the brand that is most known for in some ways to another audience. That's where I was going to say.
That's an interesting point. I think that it definitely heightened the brand, but I think it heightened the brand with Black people.
Yeah, I said a different
I think
audience.
it crossed over. It made Michigan more accessible to the culture, to black people. It made people feel more connected because it was five black guys, five freshmen starting in the NCAA championship game. I mean, it was just unheard of at the time. Like and these guys was like, they was bigger than life. They energy, they vibe, and they attitude. They was like, we got this. Yeah, we freshmen, but we got this. We class of 91, which I think that arrogance resonated through all of us who was 91s. Like, that's not just them. They just representative of the natural greatness of this class. And that's where the vibe, and all of us felt good about it, and it helped. But the football, what was wild was the issue was people didn't like basketball being bigger than football.
And I was gonna say, because that was the feel
Yeah.
of a lot of it, because the nation itself and the energy, and I assume just even the branding, because it really picked up with, shout out to like one of my dad's favorite college teams. It really transitioned at the time in college basketball from like the UNLV running Rebel team over to like this Fab Five team.
Yeah.
In the mix against like the Duke Blue Devils and all of this. Like, it's an energy that exists in that late 80s to early 90s connection of the America was watching college basketball with this interest as hip hop is interplaying into this. And I assume that you all would be in those circles probably. You said Martin, Def Comedy Jam, this is all hip hop as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And the thing is about it, it was definitely, I mean, because the Fab Five brought that hip hop vibe with them, and they brought the culture, they brought the music. I remember Tretch wearing Jalen's jersey in the Naughty by Nature videos. You know, they want them in the videos. People like shouting them out and coming to town and watching the games. They was like, oh wow, you know, those big people coming to watch us and seeing into it. And it is the blackness of it all. I think it was wow, because people hated Duke, because Duke was the stuffy white boys who played that traditional pass the ball 3 times every time before to get it. People loved UNLV because they were brash, dunking, and coming down fast. But it was in contrast to Duke. I mean, contrast. Bob Knight at Indiana playing that my father used to call white boy basketball, that 4 corners. You got to paw, you know. My father hated Bill Frieder. Before he left.
Yeah.
When Bill Frieder left to go take that job to Arizona State, my father hated the way, because he was like, Glenn Rice is a beast. Why is that man? Why don't we just let him loose? And you notice when minute Bill Frieder left, they won a national championship in '89. That was like that vibe. They let him play looser. They let him play different. And it was in opposition to that white boy basketball. And I think that culture being opposition, a lot of the blue hairs at Michigan, oh my God, the Negroes are taking over. You know, why are we talking about the basketball team instead of Bo Schembechler and the football team? Or at the time, at the car, it was not even Bo
Lloyd Carr.
Tired.
Lloyd Carr.
What it was the coach who got fired,
Gary Moeller.
Yes, Gary Moeller got fired for slapping the waitress on the ass. That was the Michigan I was at. You know, they fired this man because he slapped the waitress on the ass.
Which I think I believe that's a fireable offense. You know,
I mean, then as compared to now, we got Juwan slapping coaches.
Well, that's a man slapping a man is different than a man assaulting a woman.
No, I got you. I'm just saying, it's just that the times have changed in terms of how much emphasis the conservative nature has kind of receded a little bit.
So your time after attending, after student at Michigan, what's your path?
My path is, again, I told you, my goal in life was to get out of my mother's house. So once you reach your life goals at 18, it takes a little while to figure out what to do next. I didn't really have
some 18-year-old watching this like, I told you, Ma, I told you. I'm just messing with you. I just already feel that energy.
Yeah. But no, people talking about what's your dream job, man. In my dreams, I don't dream of labor. I think I was destined to be a professional man of leisure, but I have to eat. I have I got bills, student loans, things of that nature. But I ended up getting my first job with the university.
What was that like? And what?
I worked at the U of M Career Center. I was a
Okay.
student outreach specialist. I did.
So they be like, "Yo, man. So what was your path?" Like, I just wanted to be a man of leisure. It's like I want to do what you doing. Where's that application? Like we don't have that. But if you like to get into an engineering program, sir, I'm just messing with
you. No, just that, the birth lottery did not smile on me. That's all. But no, I worked at the career center, did outreach work, helped students do job search techniques, help them fill out resumes, interview techniques.
Okay, and wait. So how long were you there?
A year.
Okay. Because all right, so for everybody that's young watching and things, it's going to be hard to believe this, but computers existed in that early and mid 90s, but it wasn't as prevalent as now. So when you used to look and search jobs, you would actually, like, this is a cell phone, you would get on like a real phone. You have to go into real places. You have to fill out an application by hand, really have good penmanship. And that is like good handwriting and everything.
Or you use a typewriter.
See, he took it up a level. So like, because I'm thinking to myself, like, a career services then versus now, it's like, it's like I could just Google this stuff, or you could just look online. But it took like a whole different, like, even going in to get a resume, I'm guessing you had to coach people up on how to do that.
Yes. How to write a resume. We did mock interviews on video. And I'd critique their ahs, and ohs, and knows, and things of that nature.
Do you think, did you ever like see somebody and they came back to you like, "Yo, man, I got the job. Thank you so much. I'm gonna be traveling to."
That was the sucky part of the job. To be honest with you, no one came back. No one came back to say, the fruit that I got the job or I didn't get the job. People come in. Students would come in and be like, "Look, man, I graduate in 3 months. I need a job." Like,
hilarious.
Okay, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? I just need a job, man. I don't care. I just need a job. My mama say I need a job. I can't come home. And that's a lot of people just, man, I'm graduating. I'm stressed. I don't know what to do. I can't go home. I got, my apartment lease is up. I need a job. And yeah, man, it was stressful in that regard, but they never come back. You give them tips, you give them information, help them out there, walk out, love you, you the greatest, and they never tell you if they got the job.
So from there, 1 year there, where do you go from there?
From there, I went to the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at U of M. I started as an admissions counselor in August of 1996, and I ended up spending 14 years in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. I got to travel all over the country recruiting for the university.
So, like, were you one of those people that be like at like the college job fair, and then sometimes you go into the classes and speak and all of that?
Visiting high schools all over the country, at the gym, in the gyms, at the fairs, at the big convention centers, at the fairs.
What's in that journey, because that's interesting, because you travel the nation with something like that.
Yes.
What was your track? What was some of the most surprising places where it's like, man, these people are kind of coming to Michigan from here?
Wow. I mean, just going out of state to some of these places, like I used to recruit New Jersey.
Okay.
And
where about? Did they send you to the bricks? Because
I went everywhere in New Jersey. Through the whole
so
state
not
of
just
New
the
Jersey.
So you even went to like Bruce Springsteen, New Jersey, like blue collar.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Went to Fruit Wives, New Jersey, East Orange, all that good stuff in the cities. It was just wild to me is how much money some of these people got out here in this world, man. I mean, I'd visit high schools public high schools, not private high schools, but public high schools where the kids' cars in the kids' parking lot was better than the teachers' cars. And it's just like, hold on, what? And these people are like, oh, it costs $30,000 to send my kid to Michigan, no problem. Can I put that on a credit card? Like, what? I mean, just how much money people have out here in the world. And it amazed me. That was the big thing.
So you was in Sopranos, New Jersey too.
Yeah.
So that was like one of the tracks. So what was and then in that in that whole area, as you said, you like New York. So I'm guessing you would tap into the culture of New York during some of those visits too.
Yeah, I mean, my territories changed over the years. I had New York as a territory, never New York City, but I had Long Island, New York. I got to spend 2 weeks a year in New York.
Did you get like a lot of woo wear when you went there?
Get a lot of woo wear. I mean, I think Wu-Tang is all right. no disrespect. Don't come
It's
for me,
somebody
people.
it's
Yeah,
somebody that's watching this that's
that
definitely of
just
your
cut it off.
generation that
Yeah.
just I know threw a water bottle at the computer screen or
I, I
slammed
was
down their
I was
ceiling.
more of a West Coast rap person. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, it was just, I mean, the whole thing about it being out there recruiting for the state, recruiting for a public university out of state with people with money and options, like people coming up like, man, I think I'm either going to go to Harvard. Harvard is my school. I'm going to make Michigan my safety school. Or
Mhm.
I'm going to go to USC and Michigan's my safety school. Just the options that some people have in this country, man, just really blew my mind that weren't available to me or my friends or people
Mhm.
I know coming up.
And so you really went to a lot of the tracks where it was more affluent, which makes sense because I probably would send a recruiter, but it wasn't like one of those things where you're a black recruiter, so let's have you work a territory where we think nothing but black people would be.
No, not out of state.
Mhm.
They send black people to, they send me to Detroit every chance they get to support the efforts,
Mhm.
especially because I was a Cass Tech alum. Oh, man, we need you to go to Cass with the other people. We need you to go
Mhm.
to Renaissance and we need you over here. But also, the thing that, surprised me is I used to recruit out of Sturgis, Michigan on the west side of the state, White Pigeon, Michigan, near the
Mm.
border of Indiana. Uh, Figuring out how poor some white people are in this state and in this country as well, and the options they don't have. Arguing with white people about why their kids need to study foreign language.
Mm.
Why is foreign language a requirement for college? We don't need to speak no damn Spanish. They need to learn English. Like, well,
Mm.
maybe your child wants a career where they can travel to other parts of the world or expand themselves, or maybe they want to sell products to these people who speak Spanish, and that could help them.
Mm.
The short-sighted, limited mind frame that people have was also surprising. That seeing that dichotomy, go out to New Jersey and see these rich people, go to White Pigeon and see these poor people when they are white.
And also this puts you at like when we think like 96 through 2010,
Yes.
this is like probably where I'm just casting like a generalized guess, like I do a lot of times on Detroit
Yeah.
is Different, that this is like the last pulse of like people looking at college as like, okay, this is a natural gateway for opportunity. Cause today I would say other other realities kind of present themselves when people think about college. So like um I'm gonna put this in generations.
Yeah.
So baby boomers saw college as like, okay, if you got enough money, you can do something, you can get a better job than blue collar work and industrial work. So you should go to school if you have the academic abilities. I think the early generation Xers, like it was a look of like, okay, this is something that can be affluent. But due to, especially when we think of like that first crash in like 2008, that buy-in for college changes and reanimates one generation, even as we transition from the idea of like, look, I don't want to be held down by any debt. I don't want to own a home.
Yeah.
I just saw what my parents and my grandparents went through. I don't want to necessarily be carrying this college debt because I see what my parents are going through or my older brothers and sisters going through. And you're in that window. So like admissions, I think during your tenure begins to completely shift of people basically almost like I remember like those books that like at the top of the year it would be like these are the colleges you want to go to get a good job. Like I
Yeah.
don't even see those books being published anymore. I'm pretty sure they're somewhere in the list, maybe somewhere because somebody may say publishing ain't nowhere, but like it's not the same theory. So as you're recognizing this shift in how people in society view college, what impact does it have on the admissions process, or do you even really recognize it?
I mean, the primary shift we mainly saw was the population trends in terms of the state of Michigan losing population and people moving out of state and the
Mm.
South growing, and that at some point in time, Michigan is going to be in trouble because we're not going to have enough high school graduates
Mm.
to really support these institutions across the states. State of Michigan has like 14 public universities, and we're getting to the point where the population in the state is not going to be enough to support all 14, and they're going to have to focus on getting kids from out of state and more competitive. But more to your point is, I think like Gen Xer, myself, a lot, me and my generation, we were told go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a job. It was
Mhm.
all get a job. and work your job, retire. And as we've been going through our careers, we've seen pensions disappear. We've seen this emphasis on 401ks and hope the stock market doesn't drop when I retire or when we get there. But we've also seen this thing of trade schools being more promoted and entrepreneurship as a concept being more promoted, where people are starting to feel as though they don't necessarily need a college degree to build their career, and they don't want just a job. They want a career. They want something that's spiritually, emotionally fulfilling, and that they can be good at, do well, and excel and not grow in. And people don't just want a job and have a boss. And that's more the change I've seen since as I've gone into my professional career and how I've seen college. I was blessed and am blessed to still work at an institution that I've always felt is recession proof. U of M is not going anywhere. People are applying. Their application volume has gone up significantly. Michigan, as colleges in this state are dropping out or having issues. Some of the privates are having issues getting students in.
Very much so.
And it's coming to the publics, but it's going to be a lot of schools that fall off before Michigan does.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that security. And it does insulate you, and it separates you from some of the realities going on in the world, because Michigan is just a unique space in every regard. Yeah.
So from there, that 14 years, what transitions in 2010?
Well, 2010, admissions is it can be a stressful environment.
I can assume it's technically. Let me say what that is. His position is really a sales position. They can call it what they want to call it, but as an entrepreneur, that's sales. Sales is always stressful because every day is a new day. And when I say that, meaning like, I don't care if you sold 100 pieces yesterday. Yeah. You need to sell 200 today. And technically, if you set a high mark, it's not like, wow, you did the best. We never seen somebody do that good. You just set a new mark that becomes the standard of the pace that you need to stay at.
Yes.
So for anybody that wants to get in sales, it's always opportunity in sales. But just know you got to prepare yourself for this like psychotic like thinking. Hence, our former president, that all signs point to he may be our next president, is based in sales. And that you got to kind of think of that framework when you think of it. But continue.
Yeah, but also for those who may not be aware, sales is the highest paying net gross field in the world.
But it comes with the opportunity cost. There you go, another economic term that I love to present of that same stress.
But, yeah. Oh no, but it is, and it's right. But it's also I work in sales, but I'm selling a product that is limited edition, and more people want it than we have the product to give away. And that's what the real stress comes from, arguing with people about why their kid didn't get in. And I was also there during the time of affirmative action challenges.
Good old Prop 2.
Affirmative action.
Good old Prop 2.
Well, first we had the lawsuit, which the lawsuit didn't work. Then they created Prop 2 to get rid of affirmative action. And then the environment changed. And then dealing with just subtle issues with white colleagues who, because there's no more affirmative action policy, they're less inclined to help a student who could benefit from their help.
Who would think it? Who would think it?
So that kind of stuff, it just built up. But at the same time, my mother's health was declining, and it was stressful dealing with her health decline. And I saw a posting for a position as associate director at the U of M Detroit Center. I had been familiar with the Detroit Center because we had a Detroit office. The admissions had a Detroit office that was
so you had to come down here a couple times.
Yeah, come down a few times, do programming. Because of the nature of my job, I risen up to become the assistant director in charge of on-campus recruitment, and I was also the facility manager or building manager for the student activities building where the admissions office was based. So I had some facilities experience I had picked up over the years, and the position at the Detroit Center was partly the job was to support the director in developing and executing programs as well as help manage the facility. And I thought it was a good fit. I applied. I got it. I left admissions in December of 2010. I started in the Detroit Center January 3rd of 2011.
So Detroit Center,
Yes.
right there in the heart, Mac Woodward, and if you on the other side, Martin Luther King Woodward,
Yeah.
technically more Martin Luther King Woodward, but I think Mac because that's the east side of me when I think of that. But what has that culture been like? What have you seen? What have you witnessed? What has been the pulse of like U of M being in that space? Because it's like even when I think of that short time between 2011 and today, that intersection and that flow has completely shifted like so many iterations, almost like every 4 years. It seems like over there, that pulse and that culture feels different.
Well, the Detroit Center is a meeting, events, co-working space, meeting events and community and co-working space established by the university in 2005 as a means of providing more opportunity for university community members to engage in the city. Uh, I'm responsible for the day-to-day management of the facility, as well as leveraging the facility to create original community engagement activities. We do panels, discussions, lectures. We participate in tentpole community events, like we host a Thanksgiving Day parade watch party every year. We participate in the annual Concert of Colors by sponsoring the Wolverine Outdoor Stage and do 2 days of music. I think that Detroit Center has been really cool. I mean, for me, it's as a Detroiter, as a proud Michigan graduate, I'm combining two of my favorite things: my city, my university. I really strive to try to showcase university life and culture to the citizens and residents of Southeast Michigan. I try to bring in lectures and talks, but I also, when I do things, I try, like if I do a panel, I'll have experts both representing both U of M and the city on the panel. So it's not, I try to blend things in. I am out to try to entertain, enthrall, and communicate with Detroit's intelligentsia. I want to bring smart people in to talk about ideas, to talk about issues, I know we're not going to solve everything in one night, but I want to create a space and cultivate a space where people feel comfortable coming to and being challenged intellectually, to being challenged about issues and policies or things going on in the city. I like collaborating with people like you. Like I want you to come on my podcast
That's
to
going to
talk
definitely
about,
happen.
because I want U of M people to know about cool people like you doing dope shit in the city, and I want more of your audience to know about the dope shit we
Yeah.
doing at the Detroit
And
Center.
that's why I'm
Trying to
glad
do.
you're here. And
Yeah,
I was going to get to that podcast. So
yeah.
we're there, but I want to say this. Also, Detroit is different. Is like Feodies like put me down like it was the mafia. He was like, "You are an official partner now." So we've done some things at the Detroit Center. We'll be doing a lot more at the Detroit Center because I think it's a great location. And I do want you to pick back up on like I just think it's a culture right there in that it like outside of the Detroit Center, like that intersection,
Yeah.
that corner
Well,
it speaks and it changes like every 3 years. But before we get there, let's talk about the podcast. What's happening with the podcast?
okay. Well, I am the host of the Distinctly Detroit podcast, which was not a play on Detroit is different, but I like alliteration. I love alliteration. Distinctly Detroit explores the intersection of U of M community members and their work in the city of Detroit. So we interview individuals who have some affiliation with the university, whether it be staff, faculty, alumni, or community partner.
That's me. I'm technically my higher education, Henry Ford Community College, Walsh College, and Walsh College again. But I'm gonna get a PhD. It's just where I go.
You can do it, man. But so we bring in individuals who are doing cool stuff about the city. Like we interviewed Brian Perone, who started Slow's Barbecue. I mean, just was surprised, like U of M grad who started a barbecue joint in Detroit. I have this saying that it's funny, like nothing cool happens in Detroit until a white guy does it. It's been all these barbecue joints all over the city.
Hilarious.
Brian Perone comes and starts Slows, and all of a sudden barbecue is a hit in the city.
It's
all love, Brian. I love your barbecue and you the man. But it just, to me, it's funny how this city, things work in Detroit in that regard. But we I mean, I've interviewed a lot of different people. We're on season 4 currently right now. We try to produce 20 interviews per year. Um, we try to produce every 2 weeks, post every 2 weeks anywhere you get your pods. Please like, rate, subscribe. But I have certain challenges. I have student staff. I have student editors doing
Yeah,
my
man,
editing,
it is
and
what it
so
is.
the schedule. People are like, when are you posting again? As soon as they're done with midterms.
Hilarious. There you go. There you go.
Dealing with that. But I think it's also cool that I have students who are getting experience and learning, and they're growing. So I get to teach in my own way. And so that's one of the things I miss about being on campus is I don't work with students as much. But I think the work we do in Detroit is unique, is valuable, it's important. We are in the cultural district. Like I said, we're on the corner. Right now we're on the corner of Parsons and Woodward across from the DSO. And for those, in my generation, that was Cass Corridor growing up, which was Vice City back in the day. And now it's Midtown. And, it's slowly gentrifying. There's new developments. Again, since I started in January 2011, I mean, new buildings are going up, new construction. Midtown Inc. is doing a whole lot of stuff to bring in new restaurants. It's wild seeing the change, but I love it. I embrace it. I think it's cool. I think some of these restaurants are overpriced, but that's a whole nother conversation. But it is a lot going on. It's a lot culture. I mean, since they built, technically, since it's on the other side, it's not on the other side of the freeway. The Pizza Palace is in Midtowns technically still.
Hilarious.
So those things add in the Wayne State's expansion activities. They're growing and doing stuff. They had a thing called Live Midtown, which has helped build up where Wayne State, Henry Ford, DMC, and a few other businesses came together to provide supplemental monies for people to move into housing in Midtown and built it up. And it got to the point where it's like 85, 90% occupied, and they don't have enough family housing. They got a lot of student housing, single 1-bedroom apartments, studios, things of that nature, but they don't have enough 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom apartments or houses for families to move in. So it's a lot going on, lots of developments. It's wild in that regard because I remember walking through, man. When I first got there, I'm not trim or fit or anything, but I like to walk to try to keep myself moving and try to work towards fitness. And I'd walk and see drug deals and be, prostitutes, things of that nature. They slowly moving them out. The Illiches have bought some land over there and fenced some stuff off and pushing people out. So some uncool stuff going on, but most of it is cool.
Okay. So with that, man, this has been a rich discussion, and you at the end, and I got my classic Detroit is different questions.
Yes.
All right. So, very first car, year, make, and model, and year you got it.
1973 Volkswagen Super Beetle. Got it in 1989.
Okay. So it definitely had some days on it.
Yeah.
Where was the first place you went when you got it?
First place I went was to the east side of Detroit.
Okay. All right. So the destination was the loose east side. So we can pick up that he was either getting involved in, let's see, it's like Family Feud. Was he meeting a girlfriend?
Yes.
Was he meeting? Okay.
Yes.
I was going to say,
Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks at Woodward in Jefferson. You get to play 3 songs. What songs you playing?
Oh, wow. DJ at the end of the fireworks with songs. Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm going to have a hard time with this. Kevin Gates, I Don't Get Tired.
Okay.
Right now, a song I like, Future and Metro Boomin, Superheroes and Villains.
Okay.
And Public Enemy, Can't Trust It.
Okay. You're gonna have the people in a vibey mode, but still hip hop. I like it.
Yeah.
And last question: if you could rename Woodward after one Detroiter, who would it be and why?
That's an amazing question. I name it after Coleman Young.
Okay. He is the most named person.
Yeah.
But why?
Because Coleman was just that guy, man. He was the man. And, growing up in Detroit in those days, Coleman Young was the man. Like he was local boy made good. He first black mayor of the city, got rid of stress, made the police department more approachable, and dealt with the city. And then I read his autobiography and was like, oh, yeah, he is the man. Like I admire and appreciate Coleman Young and what he did for the city and what he brought and what he represented for black people across the country and what we could do.
I love it. I love it. This was a rich discussion. We're going to share more. You already dropped the line. I will be on Distinctly Detroit and so much more. We're going to collaborate a whole lot more with the U of M Detroit Center, me, Feodies, or U of M Detroit Center, Feodies. Detroit is different. We're going to be dancing, as they call it. So I love it. Thank you so much for pulling up. You actually brought a crew with you too. They don't know, but a crew is in effect. So this was like live before studio audience. But now you get to see it. So thank you so much.
All right.
Peace.
Peace, brother. Thank you.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.